Shui Wangshu rolled his eyes at Ding Ning. He was the first to get off the carriage and enter the temple. There were several ginkgo trees planted in front of the temple hall. They were very old and needed several people to surround them. The branches and leaves were thick. There were 2 life release ponds on the 2 sides. Shui Wangshu stopped in front of the life release pond on the left. Ding Ning came forward in confusion. He saw many fat red carps swimming around and many turtles climbing on the rocks in the pond. Before he could speak, Shui Wangshu pointed with a finger, and an extremely pure true essence pierced into the pool like a sword, exploding near the bottom of the pool with a hum. A millstone-like object suddenly floated up. At this time, Ding Ning noticed that this was an old turtle of unknown years. Its shell was as dark as stone. It had been stunned by Shui Wangshu's vital energy. Shui Wangshu reached out and grabbed the old turtle before anyone in the temple noticed. He quickly flashed out. Ding Ning looked at the water under his feet and did not react immediately. He quickly chased to the door and looked at Shui Wangshu, who was about to get on the carriage. He could not understand. "What are you doing?" Shui Wangshu casually threw the millstone-like old turtle under the seat of the carriage and said, "Of course, I am going to stew it." Ding Ning stilled again. He could not help but glance at the life release pond. "If you are not joking, this does not seem good." Shui Wangshu glanced coolly at him and said, "Get on." Ding Ning could not understand. He knew that there had to be a reason for something he could not understand. So he did not think more and just watched. The carriage stopped in front of a restaurant. This restaurant was not large, but it appeared to be doing well. Under Shui Wangshu's orders, the kitchen of this restaurant really stewed this old turtle. A wash basin-sized clay pot was placed in front of Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning. Shui Wangshu still did not explain anything. He calmly raised his chopsticks and ate the meat. Ding Ning did not ask anything. He ate the meat and drank the soup. Regardless of the origin of this old turtle, the chef of this small restaurant did have some tricks up his sleeves. The old turtle's meat was scattered a little in advance. After stewing it, it didn't feel that it was too old, but it was chewy and delicious. It took a lot of time to stew this old turtle. Shui Wangshu asked for several pots of huadiao. He and Ding Ning finished this pot of old turtle. When they walked out of the restaurant, it was already night, and the winter was even colder. Yet Shui Wangshu had no intentions of resting. He ordered the man who had been driving the carriage for White Goat Cave to go back and rest. Then he did not sit in the carriage and slowly walked through the streets of Chongling with his hands behind his back. Ding Ning silently followed behind him and walked through the darkness of Chongling's winter night. Chapter 104. You really have no problems? At the entrance to Falling Parasols Alley, Ding Ning looked suspiciously at Shui Wangshu and asked, "Of course there is no problem. Usually, when you cultivate in White Goat Cave, you must return home every day. Now that you have left home for a long time, why are you not going home? Also, even if you want to accompany me, you have to give me some private time," Shui Wangshu said gently. Ding Ning thought for a while and did not move immediately. "Do not look like you will not see me after tonight," Shui Wangshu said with a headache. "There really won't be any problems." Ding Ning nodded and said calmly, "Just remember what you promised." "Do I have to lie to a child who has just entered the sect like you after living so long?" Shui Wangshu was both angry and amused. He waved his hand and motioned for Ding Ning to get out of here. Ding Ning did not say anything else and bowed silently. Shui Wangshu did not look at Ding Ning and turned to leave. The moon was high in the sky. Shui Wangshu had no intentions of returning to White Goat Cave. He walked along the straight streets towards the center of Chongling. At the center of Chongling was the imperial palace. The earth-yellow imperial palace walls were not grand in the cold winter night. There was not even an obvious guard on the walls. Yet when he stepped onto the outermost world bridge of the imperial palace, an indigo-robed Taoist came through the air and landed in front of Shui Wangshu. Shui Wangshu of White Goat Cave requests an audience with Her Highness the Empress. Shui Wangshu calmly bowed to this indigo-robed Taoist and said softly, it was against the rules to request an audience with the Empress in the middle of the night when the palace gates were closed. Yet this indigo-robed Taoist only raised an eyebrow and nodded. Elder Shui, please wait a moment. I will go and report. There was even a hint of genuine respect in his words. A cultivator who had crossed Realm 7 was worthy of the respect of any cultivator and qualified to make such a request. The Taoist in indigo flew away. Shui Wangshu stood alone in front of the empty palace, looking very lonely. However, the Taoist in indigo did not make him wait for a long time. Or it could be said that the woman in the high position did not need to pretend to be dignified at all. In just a moment, the Taoist in indigo flew back to him and said, "The Empress has given her permission. Follow me." They didn't take any side door. The heavy main gate of the imperial palace slowly opened to let the Taoist in indigo and Shui Wangshu pass through. The Empress was not in the study where she often stayed. She stood on the stone path with bronze figurines on both sides. Behind her stood two beautiful maids, but just like at any other time, her dazzling beauty made any woman standing next to her pale in comparison. She looked at Shui Wangshu, who was walking towards her quietly, her perfect eyes emotionless. Your Highness' arrangement is the best for him. The Empress did not say anything else and turned to walk towards the study behind her. Shui Wangshu looked at her perfect back and could not help but think inside, "So you are colder than I imagined." The Empress seemed to be able to sense Shui Wangshu's thoughts, but she did not care. She knew that many people thought she was cold, but ruling a country was a cruel matter. Only cold-blooded laws had order. Zhangsun Qianxue sat silently on the bed with her clothes on. She looked at Ding Ning, who had washed up and changed into clean clothes, and asked, "What did you do with Feng Qianzhua?" Ding Ning, who had been waiting for her to speak and decide if she wanted to dual cultivate or go back to her bed, stilled and said curiously, "Why would you ask this question?" "Because I do not like Feng Qianzhua very much." Zhangsun Qianxue glanced at Ding Ning and indicated that he could go back to his bed to sit. She said coldly, "At the time, the Yuanwu Emperor personally led his army to attack the Bazin Kendo ground. Feng Qianzhua was one of the first Bazin Kendo ground disciples to surrender. If he surrendered, then he surrendered. Even if he sold some of the secrets of the Bazin Kendo grounds formations, it was nothing. Everyone in the Qin dynasty had different ideas about the internal war of the Qin dynasty. But when he turned against them, he said many false things about the Bazin Kendo ground. Those words are filthy to the ears. But if these dirty words spread too much, others will also believe them." Ding Ning sneered and said, "But this time he finally paid a price. He was hit by Shui Wangshu's sword. Even if he recovers, his cultivation will be greatly damaged. With the injuries to his organs, he will not live for many years." Zhangsun Qianxue did not seem satisfied with this result. She thought and said, "I will go and kill him in a while." Ding Ning immediately had a bitter expression and said, "We just went to Zhushan district. If you go and kill him on a whim, are you not drawing suspicion to me?" Zhangsun Qianxue frowned. Hearing Ding Ning say this, she felt that this was not good. There are so many people to kill. How can I kill them all at once? Ding Ning muttered, but suddenly he seemed to think of something, and his face suddenly became serious. He opened his mouth to say something, but his eyes were filled with hesitation. Zhang Sun Qianxue did not look at him, but sensed his emotions. She said in displeasure, "Speak. There is one person I can kill, and he may have something I want." Ding Ning said. Zhang Sun Qianxue said, "Who?" Ding Ning said gravely, "Nangong Shang." Zhang Sun Qianxue thought for a long time before remembering this name. A disciple of the Bazin Kendo ground sword vault. Ding Ning nodded. Compared to Feng Qianzhua, you should hate him more. Back then, he didn't just steal many famed swords of the Bazin Kendo ground ahead of time. He also destroyed 2 important formations of the Bazin Kendo ground. He also said many disgusting things. After a pause, Ding Ning added softly, "Even more importantly, he is in Chongling." Zhang Sun Qianxue said happily, "Where is he in Chongling?" "Just like Shui Wangshu, you have endured for a long time. Also, you have just formed your sword. If I do not let you use your sword, it will be detrimental to your future cultivation. You may cause trouble. This is the true reason I just now decided to tell you about this person. But even if it is revenge, killing is not something to be happy about." Ding Ning looked at Zhang Sun Qianxue's beautiful figure through the curtain and said slowly, "First, I want you to promise me that you will be absolutely safe. Do not let anyone discover that you went there." Zhang Sun Qianxue was slightly impatient and said angrily, "I am too lazy to use my brain. You can arrange it." Ding Ning nodded and said, "All right, I will find Wang Taishu tomorrow to arrange." Zhang Sun Qianxue finally thought of something and said coldly, "Wang Taishu came to find you a few days ago and said that he had done what you wanted him to do." Ding Ning's body shook slightly. His eyes filled with joy. "What does Nangong Shang have that you need?" Zhang Sun Qianxue glanced at him and asked, "Is it something from the Bazin Kendo ground?" "Not something from the Bazin Kendo ground. A pill recipe of the Nangong family." Ding Ning explained softly. The Nangong family was previously responsible for the medicinal cuisine of the Bazin Kendo ground. "I need their 5-yang pill recipe." Chapter 105. Early in the morning, Ding Ning opened the door of the wine shop at about the same time as usual. He habitually walked out of the shop with a large, coarse porcelain bowl. However, as soon as he took a step out, he thought of something and returned to the shop. He took another large bowl and then walked to the noodle shop, where he usually ate breakfast. Small icicles were hanging from the eaves on the 2 sides. But the noodle shop was too small and could not hold a table, so they only built a shed at the door and used some cotton cloth to block the wind. White steam swirled in the shed. While it could not truly expel the cold, at least it made people feel warm. Ding Ning saw Shui Wangshu sitting in the distance. He jogged over. Seeing that Shui Wangshu did not have a bowl in front of him, he could not help but laugh. "Boss, a bowl of red oil and spicy noodles." Shui Wangshu also laughed and then called out loudly. Ding Ning also asked for a bowl of the same noodles. When the noodles were served, he came out with 2 bowls and handed one to Shui Wangshu. The 2 finished eating and then looked at each other's slightly sweaty foreheads. Ding Ning asked, "You came so early today. Where are you preparing to go?" Shui Wangshu thought, and then said, "Today we are going to the Tiger Wolf Army Northern Camp." Ding Ning was silent for a moment, and then said, "Who are you going to find?" Shui Wangshu said, honestly, "General Liang Lian." Ding Ning's brow trembled slightly. His gaze unconsciously landed on the last flower sword at his waist. He increasingly felt that this remnant sword was like a thread in the unseen world that tied more and more matters and people together. Or it could be said that this was like a curse. Before this sword appeared, many things seemed to be very far away from him. Even if he had been planning certain things and inquiring about certain things, after this sword appeared, many favors and grudges came one after another. It seemed that he could not get rid of them. Was this the will of the heavens? It wasn't that he was too anxious, but that the time had really come. Shui Wangshu looked at his strange expression and asked, "What's wrong?" Ding Ning raised his head and asked softly, "Is this what the Empress wants? You went to listen to her last night." Shui Wangshu paused for a moment, then nodded, "Because I look forward to your performance at the Min Mountain Sword Trials. I also think that if you can win as first, then you will have great glory. Originally, living a few more years is not as important as my old face, but for this, I have to go and listen to her opinion." After a pause, Shui Wangshu said gently, "Originally, she did not want you to know this was her arrangement. For me, I did not want you to know this was her arrangement, because she is right. If you have hatred towards her and the people in court, it is not a good thing for your future growth in Chongling. But I know you are too smart. Even if I do not tell you, you will be able to guess." Ding Ning listened to these words and did not express any thoughts about the Empress. He said, "Regardless of the reason she is dissatisfied with Liang Lian, if Liang Lian is just a Realm 6 cultivator, she will not have to waste so much effort. So Liang Lian must have reached Realm 7. You will die. She wants me to see you die with my own eyes. She probably wants you to find an excuse, a reason why you must challenge Liang Lian. This way, even if I hate, I will hate Liang Lian. It is not a problem for the officials to hate each other. After all, they are just the weapons of the Qin dynasty, His Majesty's private property, and they can restrict each other." After saying this, Ding Ning was silent for a moment and said, "I know she is cold, but I had not expected her to be so cold." Shui Wangshu had been listening calmly. Hearing this, he shook his head and said, "You are still too smart. In terms of knowledge of politics, it is not just the people of Zhushan district who are not as good as you. Most people in Chongling are not as good as you. But if you are truly smart, you should know it is best to pretend you do not see these things." He looked at Ding Ning's eyes and warned in a heavier tone, "Even if you feel a thread of hatred towards her and the court, you have to pretend you do not, because this at least shows a submissive attitude." Ding Ning said in a cold voice, "Right now, she and His Majesty do not care if the cultivators of the Qin dynasty have their own thoughts. They only care if we obey at certain times. A powerful dynasty must give up on the interests and thoughts of some people. We are just a small minority. Also, in truth, everyone in the Qin dynasty is living and working in peace. His Majesty is the strongest and wisest emperor in the history of the Qin dynasty." Shui Wangshu smiled slightly and said, "It is good that you understand. Even if her thoughts are cold, our initial request of being able to watch the Min Mountain Sword Trials will be fulfilled. From this point of view, we should be grateful to her." Ding Ning was silent. Shui Wangshu seemed to see through his thoughts. He smiled and said gently, "In reality, you should change your thinking. I have truly angered an unbeatable opponent, but this opponent still gives me room to choose and enough time. Also, I can guarantee that I will not pass through this time in pain. If you think this way, you will not feel that it is especially cruel for her to want you to watch me slowly die. Also, you will be able to see a true battle above Realm 7. This may be useful for your future cultivation." "You are right." Ding Ning put away the 2 bowls. His expression returned to calmness as he said this, but his heart was unusually cold as he spoke slowly. "It is a pity that she has such thoughts. It is a pity that even without these things, I cannot forgive her coldness." The morning light grew thicker, but the sky over Chongling grew hazy because another snowstorm started to fall. This time, it was not a light snow, but a heavy snowfall. Liang Lian walked on the practice field of the Tiger Wolf army. His military boots creaked as he stepped on the snow. He was quite satisfied when he saw the Tiger Wolf Army's war chariots that were already in the midst of a meticulous charging drill on another training field. However, at that moment, he sensed a peculiar aura. This was a presence that could attract the attention of any cultivator in Chongling. This presence pulled at the primal energies of the universe outside the camp and the flying snow. It slowly pulled up a large flag in the air. Sensing the snow flag forming in the air, Liang Lian frowned deeply. He did not hesitate. His military equipment steadily stepped over the snow and walked out of the camp. As he walked, many cultivators in the camp sensed the abnormality. They walked out of their tents and flashed out of the camp in shock. A large yellow umbrella slowly floated over in the wind and snow. This umbrella was very large. There were two figures, one large and one small, under the umbrella. The wind and snow fell on the shiny umbrella. They did not stick and floated upwards. In the air above the umbrella, there were some refractions that revealed the outline of a large flag. Seeing Liang Lian walk out of the camp, the white-haired old man under the umbrella smiled calmly and said, "General Liang Lian, I challenge you." Liang Lian looked silently at Xue Wangshu and Ding Ning under the umbrella. His cold eyes had been slightly puzzled, but when he heard the words, he immediately understood many things. The incoming wind and snow parted to the sides in fear. His figure suddenly became clear in the wind and snow. Then he reached out and made a fist behind him. All the cultivators coming out of the camp saw his gesture and stopped. They did not take a step out of the camp. "All right." Then he looked at Xue Wangshu and nodded. He said coolly, "I accept your challenge." Ding Ning saw Liang Lian clearly in the wind and snow. He was certain that Song Shinshu was right. He did not say anything and silently started to retreat. Liang Lian's gaze suddenly landed on Ding Ning. He seemed to remember something and said expressionlessly, "Your student is interesting." Xue Wangshu smiled slightly and said, "I will need General Liang's guidance in the future." Liang Lian did not answer. His gaze moved away from Ding Ning. Then his body began to swell. It was as if an iron mountain was standing at the entrance of the military camp. Xue Wangshu smiled and said, "General, please take my sword." The moment he spoke, many of the dancing snowflakes in front of him were pulled in by the primal energies of the universe coming out of his body and formed into lines of ice in the wind and snow. Each ice thread was a talisman thread. Huang Jinwei, who looked gentle and modest, had a serious expression at this time. Hearing the old man's words, he could not help but say softly, "The dam-breaching sword will become stronger as it accumulates. When it breaks, the sword essence will burst out. General Liang Lian is truly a veteran general. Against Xue with this kind of sword move, Xue will probably be forced to attack first." The old man nodded in agreement. At this time, a dazzling light appeared in the wind and snow. Xue Wangshu's figure appeared in the wind and snow. A dazzling light appeared in his right palm. It was pure and bright without any impurities and even gave off a holy aura. He used his life-bound sword. This sword in the stone that he had just polished in his battle with Feng Qinshua shone brightly. Endless dazzling sword light erupted from the short sword in his hand. It immediately lit up the space in front of him, all of the north camp of the Tiger Wolf Army, and the north camp of the Tiger Wolf Army that was shrouded in wind and snow as bright as day. Xue Wangshu held this sword and stabbed at the dam in front of him with a calm expression. An enormous white goat horn appeared in front of him, just like the sword he had displayed when he passed the sect master sword to Li Daoji. This white goat horn was slightly curved, but the sharpest horn of this white goat horn did not directly stab at the dam in front of him, and just brushed past it. This white goat's horn, the thickest and sturdiest part, leaned forward and held on. The true meaning of the white goat sword was not to charge, but to endure, to resist. The curved white goat horn pressed against the dam and used up the power of the dam as though it wanted to break the dam into pieces and let the water inside flow out through the gaps. Seeing such a sword, the old man on the rattan chair in the turret was shocked. He could not help but praise, "Wonderful!" Behind him, Huang Jinwei's eyes were also filled with light. At the same time, he could not help but praise, "Wonderful!" Liang Lian's pupils suddenly contracted. Seeing the white goat horn-like sword light pressing down, he did not hesitate and punched with his left fist. A muffled explosion sounded again in the world. His left fist, which was as hard as iron, struck his own sword. The life-bound sword in his right hand met Shui Wangshu's life-bound sword. The accumulated sword force seemed to have dissipated in an instant, and the sword in his hand seemed to have turned into a horizontal city wall. Boom! His left fist once again hit his own sword, wanting to push away Shui Wangshu's sword. This kind of countervailing power grew so strong that he felt he could not withstand it. With this punch, the stone path under his feet completely exploded, and blood spurted out from the soles of his feet. A powerful force entered Shui Wangshu's body along the sword. Many soft sounds came from Shui Wangshu's body, as if dust was being shaken out of his skin. He sensed that the cultivator who had spoken had been staying in this winter forest for a long time, but he had not sensed this person's existence before. A woman slowly appeared in his line of sight. Her figure was shrouded in the wind and snow. What made him even more anxious was that he could barely see the scenery in the wind and snow, but he could not see anything around her. "Who are you?" Thinking about it, it was impossible for him to have such an enemy, especially a woman whose cultivation was clearly above his own. This pale-faced, middle-aged scholar added in shock, "Did you recognize the wrong person? Are you not Nangong Shang, one of the disciples of the Bazin Kendo ground sword storehouse?" The woman's cold voice sounded again. The middle-aged scholar seemed to have been bitten by a snake. His face turned snow-white, and his body unconsciously shrank back. His throat seemed to be gripped as he made a disbelieving sound. "You are a survivor of the Bazin Kendo ground." The woman shrouded in the wind and snow confirmed his identity. She did not seem to want to waste words with him. She said coldly and simply, "No, 5-goat pill." "Not." Nangong Shang stilled. He looked in incomprehension at the woman's figure and repeated, 5-goat pill." The woman said in displeasure, "I want the 5-goat pill recipe." 5-goat pill recipe? Nangong Shang was even more confused. "Just a pill recipe like this?" The woman said, "You do not know?" Nangong Shang suddenly felt a terrifying murderousness. His body froze slightly, and he said coldly, "The Nangong family has such a pill recipe, but it is not on me. Also, this pill recipe is one of the many pill recipes of the Nangong family. We do not usually use it. How can I remember it?" The woman seemed to know he would answer like this. She spoke quickly as though she was reciting a book. "Tell me where the pill recipe is in your family. If you lie, I will kill everyone in your family. I know you are a filial son, and take care of your mother. I think you do not want to see her head separated from her body." Nangong Shang suddenly grew furious and said harshly, "Who are you? Even if you are one of those great rebels, this is Chongling. Today, many cultivators are paying attention to the Tiger and Wolf army camp. There are many important people here. Even if you can kill me, I do not believe you can escape after we fight." The woman shrouded in the wind, and snow seemed to know what he was going to say. So she did not pause and said coldly, "Killing you here does not need to attract their attention." As she spoke, a strange coldness spread through the wind and snow in the winter forest. Nangong Shang looked up in shock. He saw the snow outside was still falling slowly and had not changed at all. Yet, when the falling snow was dozens of feet above his and the woman's heads, it seemed to accumulate on the ground, growing thicker and forming a curtain of snow. The entire winter forest was covered by this strange curtain of snow, as if it was a unique world. The wind and snow outside could not pass in, and even the primal energies of the universe could not pass in. This was a unique spirit formation. It was a spirit formation that was waiting for him to enter. Nangong Shang's forehead was covered in cold sweat, but he still had one last hope. He laughed harshly. A very powerful formation, but the primal energies of the universe cannot enter. So what if you are a mountain moving realm cultivator? I am realm 6 first class. How can you quickly defeat me? The wind and snow around the woman suddenly disappeared. Nangong Shang's laughter suddenly stopped. He felt as if the space in front of him had lit up. What appeared in his line of sight was an extremely beautiful face. However, at this moment, a deep blue flame appeared in the hand of this excessively beautiful woman. His breathing suddenly stopped. It was just a little bit of aura, but he felt that the blood in his body seemed to be frozen. He felt that he was no match for it. The blue flame grew thicker and finally turned blue-black. 9 Hell King Sword. Seeing the final color of the other's life bond sword and the blue ice particles floating in the air, Nangong Shang was dazed and howled like he had seen a ghost. Chapter 108. Nangong Shang's, usually proud, eyes only had the deepest terror left. As he screamed, he instinctively attacked with his sword, and all of his vital energy surged out of his body. The sword in the unusually beautiful woman's hand had taken form and revealed its true appearance. The color of this sword was so deep, it was like the water of the deep sea and the darkest night had settled together. It was so deep that people would feel like they would be sucked into an endless abyss. The unusually beautiful woman showed a hint of anticipation and excitement on her cold face. She simply sent the sword forward. The sword and Nangong Shang were dozens of feet apart, but as the sword was sent out, countless blue ice grains fell on Nangong Shang's body. Nangong Shang trembled in terror. The cold air contained within these tiny ice grains directly caused the flow of true essence in his body to stagnate. His vital energy could not flow. How could he fight? At this time, he finally understood why the other was so fearless. Because the legends about this sword were true. Just being able to control this sword meant that she had Realm 7 power. Looking at the sword essence that came closer to him, he thought of more things. He was even more shocked and in disbelief. You are the eldest miss of the Gongsun family. How could you possibly cultivate this 9 Hell King sword into a life sword? He used all of his strength to cry like a bullied child, and as if he had discovered a shocking secret, he shouted these 2 sentences. The 9 Hell King sword was a vicious sword left behind by the Yu dynasty. Legend had it that this sword was made from the netherworld jade in the coldest place in the world. It was the coldest item in the world. In some myths and legends, weapons made from netherworld jade were not weapons of the human world. They were the weapons of the netherworld king and his netherworld generals. For cultivators, if the cold energy was too strong, it meant that it would harm their energies. So while this sword was one of the strongest swords in the world, it would be disadvantageous for cultivators to carry it for a long time, much less forge it into a life sword. However, the sword in front of his eyes was completely illogical. It had been refined into a natal sword. However, compared to the sword, what shocked Nangong Shang even more was the identity of this beautiful woman. In the present Chongling, there were almost no members of the Gongsun clan. Yet in the past Chongling, before the Yuanwu Emperor's bloody reform, the Gongsun clan had been the most prominent family in Chongling. Nangong Shang was a former disciple of the Bazin Kendo ground, and his status in the sect was higher than Feng Qianzhua's, the Bazin Kendo ground, and that person who became a taboo, the Yuanwu Emperor, the Empress, and the two prime ministers wanted to completely erase him from the history of the Qin dynasty. Anyone who mentioned his name in Chongling would have their entire family wiped out. He was the staunchest supporter of that reform and the strongest backing. So Nangong Shang knew better than most of the present Chongling officials what had happened back then, and what path the Yuanwu Emperor had taken to ascend the throne. Hearing his shout, the unusually beautiful woman's expression turned cold. She had put away her sword, but the blue ice in the winter forest suddenly sped up and hit Nangong Shang's body with popping sounds. A layer of blue ice immediately formed on the surface of Nangong Shang's body, and he was unable to move. "Why do you want to kill me? Since you are the eldest miss of the Gongsun family, you should not kill me." "Why?" Sensing the other's true killing intent, Nangong Shang, who knew he could not even draw his sword, used all his strength to squeeze out a shout. Because he knew the story he could not understand. When the Yuanwu Emperor used the Shang family to carry out the reform, he had not officially ascended the throne. In reality, he had firmly controlled the court. Yet because the new policies offended the interests of too many prestigious families, he still encountered unimaginable strong opposition. This kind of powerful struggle between the prestigious families and the court would not just threaten the throne of an emperor, but would cause a dynasty to quickly decline. At the time, some of the powerful, prestigious families had started to borrow the power of other dynasties to fight against the Yuanwu Emperor. In the view of most people at the time, and even most of the officials in court loyal to the Yuanwu Emperor, the reform this time would not succeed. Yet the Yuanwu Emperor was an extraordinary person, or rather, that person and many people who stood with that person were extraordinary. In that kind of situation, they did not hesitate at all and used the most ruthless and powerful methods as quickly as possible. The Yuanwu Emperor started with the most powerful Gongsun clan. Using the reason that the Gongsun clan had driven their horses and destroyed farmland, he punished them severely according to the new laws and executed them. When the Gongsun clan fought back, in one night they used the army and countless cultivators to uproot the Gongsun clan from Chongling. That person and the famed swords of the Bazin Kendo ground were the true reason why the Gongsun clan could not fight back. The strongest cultivators of the Gongsun clan all died at the hands of that person that night. That night, all of Chongling's nobility were killed by a sword. In the legends, only the young miss of the Gongsun clan survived. That young miss had not been on good terms with her family and had been traveling outside. The Nine-Hell King's sword had originally been in the hands of the Gongsun clan. Supposedly, she had taken it with her when she left the Gongsun clan. Chapter 109. A cultivator dressed in purple robes landed outside the winter forest by the river. This cultivator was very young, with sharp brows and bright eyes. He was extremely handsome, and unlike ordinary handsome young people, he had a unique light. Just like Li Lingjuan's light, this light came from confidence, presence, birth, and many other factors, and had nothing to do with appearance. The purple robe on his body was completely different from ordinary clothes. It also emitted a dazzling light. Every thread seemed to be made of a unique material. It even gave people a feeling that every thread was a unique seal line that could help him absorb the energy of the world. There were no special decorations or markings on the purple robes, but this emptiness and the unique presence and light on the purple robes were the greatest signs. This was the sect robes of Lingshu Sword Gate. Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate were two supreme sections. Only Realm 3 and above disciples qualified to leave the mountains. Otherwise, They could only stay in the mountains for the rest of their lives. Of all the disciples who could walk in the mortal world, only the direct disciples who had been personally appointed by the sect master qualified to wear the sect robes and walk outside. Every action, every word, and every battle represented the honor and disgrace of the sect. The direct disciples of Lingshu Sword Gate, who could represent the sect, were naturally not ordinary. While he had sensed a battle above Realm 7 and had not arrived in time, this winter forest in front of him did not seem to have any abnormalities. But looking at the winter forest by the river from a distance, he felt something was wrong. Now that he was close, he finally sensed what was wrong. This winter forest was too quiet. This silence did not mean that there was no sound of snow falling, but that the soft sounds were too singular. Countless snowflakes fell from the sky and landed in the forest. There were trees, dried branches, dried leaves, soil, stone. When the snow fell on these things, the sound was soft, but the sound was different. For a cultivator like him, if he listened carefully, the countless different subtle sounds should be a unique and mysterious piece of music, a natural symphony between heaven and earth. However, at this moment, the sound of snow falling was abnormally monotonous. It was as if every snowflake had landed on a carpet. The true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate, who had truly sensed where the abnormality came from, had an unusually grave expression. Such a formation represented an extremely powerful force. However, why would someone set up such a formation in this ordinary winter forest that was obviously used to conceal aura and sound? It was also at this moment that the winter forest in front of him suddenly emitted the sound of an eggshell cracking. Because this voice was too cold and concentrated, it made people feel mournful and even shudder. A clear sound of vibration rang out. A flying sword suddenly flew out from his sleeve, as if it had a life of its own. It rapidly revolved around his body. At the same time, the true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate subconsciously sent his psyche power into the forest where the power of the magic array had already disappeared. His expression suddenly changed. His body floated into the air along with the light purple flying sword. His movements were indescribably graceful. In a flash, his figure was deep in the forest. At this time, countless eggshell-like pieces of the snow curtain fell to the ground around him. His breathing suddenly stopped. In front of him stood a corpse that was already completely cold and hard. Official Nangong of the palace secretary. The moment he saw the face of this corpse, this true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate recognized the identity and exclaimed. His voice caused the surrounding air to vibrate. With this slight vibration, Nangong Shang's corpse gave off many soft, cracking sounds. It was as though many dust particles were surging out of his body. In the next second, Nangong Shang's corpse collapsed right in front of him, turning into shattered pieces of ice on the ground. Who is it? This true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate paled. This was Chongling. Nangong Shang was an important official of the palace secretary. Also, the battle outside the north camp of the Tiger Wolf army must have attracted the attention of many powerful cultivators in Chongling, who dared to kill an important official of the Qin dynasty here. Also, what method was this to be able to form such cold energy that did not seem to belong to the mortal world? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, this true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate did not hesitate. With a shout, the light purple flying sword around him seemed to burn and charged into the sky at a terrifying speed. There was a loud explosion. In the wind and snow above the winter forest, it was as if a purple flood dragon had suddenly appeared. Ding Ning's yellow oiled paper umbrella was covered in snow and turned pure white. While most of his weight was on Ding Ning's shoulder, Shui Wangshu still felt that every strand of flesh in his body grew sore, and his body grew colder. I've finally experienced what it's like for an ordinary old man to have one foot in the grave. This feeling is very fresh. To be able to experience this feeling at the end of my life, instead of dying in battle, my life is more complete. Shui Wangshu struggled to breathe and said to Ding Ning, "Pity that starting from today until the Min Mountain Sword trials, I cannot be your support." Ding Ning shook his head and said, "No matter. Starting today, I have a greater support. Before the Min Mountain Sword trials, no one will dare to move against me." Shui Wangshu stilled slightly. "I do not understand." Chapter 110. The wind and snow were furious. Chongling's heavy snow lasted for many days. Many Chongling cultivators even thought that this unusually long snow had a lot to do with Liang Lian and Shui Wangshu moving large amounts of primal energies of the universe. The movement of large amounts of primal energies of the universe was enough to affect the weather for a while. In the memories of many older cultivators, in the battle before the Yuanwu Emperor's ascension to the Bazan Kendo ground, the astounding movement of primal energies of the universe caused the Ba Mountains to rain heavily for 3 months. The battle between Shui Wangshu and Liang Lian once again proved that cultivators above Realm 7 were extraordinary existences. Compared to the fact that the Tiger and Wolf army's General Liang Lian was a cultivator above Realm 7, Shui Wangshu's strength shocked many cultivators in Chongling again. But in this snowstorm, there were many more shocking things that happened. An enormous fleet of armored ships unique to the Qin dynasty was braving the wind and snow as they sailed out of the Wei River port outside Chongling. A carriage was parked at the top of a tall hill outside the city, hidden in the wind and snow. The one driving the carriage was a deaf and mute old servant. The person in deep red robes sitting in the carriage was naturally one of the most powerful people in Chongling, Chief Inspector Chen of the Divinity Bureau. He still had a dispirited expression as he lifted the curtain and looked at the fleet coming out of the port. A black dot appeared on the snow path behind the carriage. The black dot slowly expanded. It was a black umbrella. The woman under the black umbrella wore a white dress. She had a scholarly air, and her waist was moving. She was very beautiful. A woman who could hold the black umbrella of the Bureau of Astrology and walk so calmly as she approached Bureau Chief Chen, naturally exuding a presence that could rival him, was the Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Astrology, Yi Siling. Without any unnecessary opening remarks, Chief Inspector Chen, who had been watching the fleet from beginning to end, slowly said, "The one leading the fleet out to sea is Bureau Chief Su of the Bureau of Rights." In many stories of Chongling, the masters of the Astrology Bureau and the Divinity Bureau were mortal enemies. Even in the eyes of their closest subordinates, these two nobles usually fought openly and covertly. After many things, they had passed many swords to each other. But at this time, Yi Siling, who walked to the side of the carriage with the black umbrella, had no hostility or killing intent in his eyes. She only frowned slightly, silently looking at the cold and mighty armored fleet that was breaking through the waves in the wind and snow. Searching for medicine overseas has been a tradition since the late emperor. That's why our Qin dynasty has such a huge warship that other dynasties don't have. Chief Inspector Chen glanced at her and continued. But ever since His Majesty had a breakthrough to Realm 7, his desire to search for medicine overseas has been especially urgent. It is unprecedented for you to conquer the island countries and open up many sea routes. This time, it is even more inconceivable for Bureau Chief Su to lead an army out to sea. Yi Siling looked for a moment and said with a frown, "The ships are very deep in the water. They are carrying large amounts of goods. Even with thousands of students and soldiers, they will not be able to use them all in a short time." Chief Inspector Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. He said darkly, It appears that this fleet will not return for a while. Yi Sealing slowly nodded and said, Bureau Chief Su is one of His Majesty's most trusted people. Chief Inspector Chen took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He said softly, You mean that something has happened to His Majesty's cultivation, so he has an even greater need for spirit medicines? Yi Sealing shook his head. The Deer Mountain Conference is near. He has already passed Realm 7 and has reached Realm 8. This is enough for the 3 dynasties to renew their alliance. Before the Deer Mountain Conference, he will only use the safest cultivation method. He will not take any risks. So there will not be any problems with his cultivation. Chief Inspector Chen thought for a long time with a bowed head. His eyes flashed with an unusual light. You say that there will not be any problems with his cultivation. You mean that there will not be any problems with his present cultivation and body. He looked up at Yi Sealing. Then it should be that he feels there is a problem with the next realm. Yi Sealing's eyes narrowed slightly. Then this is the greatest problem. Other people might only know that the Yuanwu Emperor was strong, but not how strong the Yuanwu Emperor was. But she and Chief Inspector Chen were among the group of people who understood the Yuanwu Emperor the best in Chongling. So she was certain that the Yuanwu Emperor had reached Realm 8. To such a heaven-defying expert, encountering difficulties and insurmountable obstacles on the path of cultivation wasn't the biggest problem. An existence like him possessed the strength of an entire dynasty, and he could slowly climb up even the tallest mountain. The greatest problem was that he could not see the tall mountain. He could not sense the next realm, or rather, he could not sense the path to the next realm. This was the greatest problem. Above Realm 8 was longevity, the legendary Realm 9. If even an existence like the Yuanwu Emperor was confused about the path ahead and started to doubt this Realm 9, then who in the world could reach Realm 9? Yi Sealing and Chief Inspector Chen sank into deep silence. A long time later, when the mighty armored fleet had completely disappeared into the wind and snow, Chief Inspector Chen spoke first. That day, when Xue Wangshu and Liang Lian fought in a river forest 10 miles from the North Tiger and Wolf Camp, a cultivator died. He was Nangong Shang of the Palace Historian Bureau. Yi Sealing immediately frowned deeply. I know that you were near the Tiger and Wolf Army at the time. The reason you did not detect it was because the one who killed him was the 9 Hell King sword. Chief Inspector Chen glanced at her and said, Yi Sealing stilled, strange emotions flowing through his eyes. So even she has appeared in Chongling and can use the power of the 9 Hell King sword? No wonder the Astrology Bureau did not know that someone like Nangong Shang was killed. Chief Inspector Chen looked down at his slightly yellow fingernails and said softly, Does the Astrology Bureau have any clues about that person's heir? Yi Sealing turned around, looked at him, and said coldly, If there is, I would have told you. Why do you have such a question? This is different from the past. Chief Inspector Chen looked up and met her gaze. He said with difficulty, In the past, in the eyes of everyone in Chongling, including the Holy One and the Empress, we were irreconcilable enemies. If they have such thoughts, they will feel that we are easier to control and deal with. Then we can live better in Chongling. But this time is really different because that person is involved this time, and I understand you better than anyone else, so even I do not have much confidence. You fear that I will do something stupid and drag you down with me? You do not need to worry like this. Everything is too far away. This is the 11th year of Yuanwu of the Qin dynasty. Yi Sealing looked at him and said coldly. Then she turned and left without another word, quickly disappearing into the wind and snow. Chief Inspector Chen looked at the long trail of footprints she left behind that slowly disappeared in the wind and snow. His expression was even more desolate and dispirited. He slowly shook his head and sighed. I understand what you mean. That person has been dead for more than a decade. Everything should have been decided. Many of the principles of the previous dynasty do not work now. But everyone knows that many things are still there. I fear that you will use the things of the previous dynasty to do the present things. The snow was falling heavily. Thick snow had accumulated in front of the doors of Chongling. In the streets around Falling Parasol, every family was sweeping the snow in front of their doors. Ding Ning, holding a shovel, was one of them. You do not care about the wine shop's business. Why waste this effort? Looking at Ding Ning, who was working hard to shovel the snow, Shui Wangshu, who was sitting on a chair under the eaves, warming himself by the fire, wearing thick cotton robes and a large weasel fur hat. He looked slightly comical. Hearing his words, Ding Ning straightened and said, "This is not the same. Everyone is sweeping the snow, but I am not sweeping. When the snow stops and many carriages pass, the dirty water from the snow will flow to people's doors. I am sweeping the snow now because everyone is sweeping the snow." Shui Wangshu stilled. "I do not understand such a simple principle." After a long pause, he said emotionally, "No wonder some cultivators have to cultivate in the mortal world. Some small things in the mortal world usually contain many great principles." After the battle with Liang Lian, Ding Ning stubbornly did not have him return to White Goat Cave. Instead, he had Wang Taishu help him rent a courtyard in Falling Parasol. Now, he increasingly felt that Ding Ning's actions were correct. Since he had returned to being an ordinary old person, he naturally had to live like an ordinary old person and experience a life he did not have in the past. Cave Master. However, a cry that sounded like it was about to cry broke the mood. A tall figure swept in from the side of the alley, like the wind. With a plop, the figure fell in front of him and placed both hands on his knees. "Cave Master, why did you have to fight a general? You are like this now. What can we do?" The newcomer's face was covered in tears, and his expression was unspeakably benevolent. It was the eldest sect brother of White Goat Cave, Zhang Yi. Shui Wangshu did not know whether to laugh or cry, but looking at this sincere student, he sighed in the end. "You are not dead. Why are you crying? Get up." Zhang Yi rose, but hearing this, he still couldn't help but sob. How could he not cry? A few days ago, he was still a Realm 7 cave master. Today, he had become an ordinary old man with one foot in the grave. He couldn't even withstand the cold. At this time, another proud young person appeared at the alley Zhang Yi had entered. This was a youth from Guangzhou, who carried a purple sword on his back. Behind him was a slightly plump middle-aged merchant with an amiable face. This youth from Guangzhou walked quickly towards Ding Ning. He frowned slightly and said, "How you feel about Xie Ro has nothing to do with me. You know, that is just Xie Ro's own thoughts." Shen Yi also frowned and said sincerely, "But I think if I can prove that I am better than you, she may change her mind." Ding Ning said calmly, "What does that have to do with me? This is between you and her. Do you want me to fight with you and help you prove that you are better than me? What benefit do I have?" Shen Yi stilled again. In his view, this was a simple matter. As long as he found Ding Ning, they could start a fair fight. But when he heard Ding Ning's words, he did not have any words to refute. This seemed to be a matter that only benefited him, and not Ding Ning. Looking at the stunned him, Ding Ning, who had no interest in fighting, opened his mouth and wanted to say something to make the other give up on this idea. But at this time, Shui Wangshu behind him coughed softly and said like a child, "Ding Ning, I want to see you fight." Ding Ning paused and did not speak. Shun Yi's eyes immediately shone with hope. The slightly fat merchant behind him also coughed softly. He looked at Ding Ning and said in a deliberative tone, "If you feel there is no benefit to you, maybe we can give some compensation?" Ding Ning thought for a moment and said, Okay. Shen Yi immediately grew excited. Little sect brother, this is not good, right? Zhang Yi, with tears on his face, had a bitter expression. He had never heard of one side giving compensation to the other in a duel in Chongling. This was not a street performer who had to give tips. I want 3 on grass. Ding Ning did not care about his opinion. He looked at Shen Yi and the slightly fat merchant behind him and said, "Of course, if I win, you will give me 3 on grass. If I lose, there is no need." Shen Yi instinctively turned his head and asked the slightly fat merchant behind him, "Uncle Jean, what is 3 on grass?" The slightly fat merchant responded softly, "A spirit medicine that can strengthen the spleen and kidney. The price is not low, but it can still be found." Shen Yi was immediately overjoyed. He looked at Ding Ning and said, "Your request is not excessive, and the condition is to win against me. Since that is the case, if you can win against me, the Shun family will give you as many 3 yang grass as we can find." Ding Ning nodded calmly. "This is good." Shui Wangshu, who was behind him, was a bit worried. He asked softly, "What are you using the 3 sun grass for? Did you see a pill recipe that is beneficial to your body? Is this pill recipe reliable?" Ding Ning turned to look at him and said, "It is reliable, do not worry." Seeing Ding Ning so certain, Shui Wangshu chuckled and did not say anything else. Shen Yi grew excited and asked, "Then can we start now?" Ding Ning put down the shovel in his hand and wiped his hands. He saw Zhang Yi, whose tears were about to form frost, standing next to Shui Wangshu. He took 2 steps forward in the snow and then said to Shen Yi, "Yes." Shen Yi gripped the hilt of the purple longsword on his back. He looked at Ding Ning and asked softly, "You have not reached vital energy realm?" Ding Ning looked strangely at him and nodded. "Please." Shen Yi did not say anything else. According to Chongling's etiquette, he pulled out his sword and held it across his chest. Ding Ning's expression became absolutely calm again. He did not speak. He gripped the hilt of the last flower sword, pulled it out of its ordinary sheath, and held it across his chest. The people sweeping the snow in the streets grew excited. The neighbors here all knew that the owner of the wine shop, Ding Ning, had become a cultivator. While their initial excitement had passed, seeing such a battle, they naturally wanted to see what little boss Ding Ning, who had become a cultivator, could do. "Do not be afraid. Fight well. Do not embarrass our falling parasol. If you win, I do not want your noodles' money tomorrow." Countless voices rang out. Among the voices, Shun Yi's eyebrows rose slightly when he saw Ding Ning did not attack first. A sharp aura suddenly flashed across his determined face. All the chaotic shouts suddenly stopped. Shen Yi attacked at this time. He swung his sword at Ding Ning. He and Ding Ning were at least 50 feet apart. When he swung his sword, he should not have been able to touch Ding Ning's body. But as he swung his sword, his figure flashed quickly. The remaining snow between him and Ding Ning was turned to powder by a powerful force and spread outwards. In the blink of an eye, he had already traversed a distance of over 30 meters and arrived in front of Ding Ning. The golden seal scripts on his sword lit up. Threads of energy seeped out of the blade and formed true golden lightning. The poor families of Falling Parasol had never seen such a scene of lightning and thunder coming out of a sword. They were stunned. But when they saw the golden lightning jump out of the purple sword, Zhang Yi, standing next to Shui Wangshu, stared with wide eyes and praised apologetically. "A true gentleman. I have judged a gentleman with my own yardstick." The reason why he gave such praise was because when he heard Chen Yi ask about Ding Ning's cultivation, he thought that Chen Yi had determined that Ding Ning had not yet reached the true element boundary, which was why he had acted so confidently. But now he found that Shen Yi was so certain of Ding Ning's cultivation because he did not want to take advantage of Ding Ning in terms of vital energy. At this moment, he had only suppressed his strength to the peak of the second realm for this strike. Ding Ning frowned slightly. The moment Shen Yi attacked, he had sensed Shen Yi's intentions. But in his view, this would have no effect on the result of this battle. If it could make victory easier, he would not refuse. So when Shen Yi advanced, his physical energy furiously flooded into the last flower remnant sword in his hand. White seal lines formed on both sides of his body. He did not even take a step back. He had waited for Shen Yi to attack first to lock down Shen Yi's sword move. In a flash, the wind and lightning were in front of him. The golden lightning was less than a foot away from his chest. But in this moment, two sword seals formed as the remnant sword in his hand spun quickly and formed on his sides. There was a loud explosion. Two powerful balls of indigo energy formed out of thin air. There seemed to be two green mountains rising and closing in front of Ding Ning. The golden lightning was unable to advance even an inch between the two green mountains that formed the two sides of the lake. White Goat Sword Seal Manual. Little sect brother. Little sect brother. Zhang Yi's eyes were wide. He was pleasantly surprised and in disbelief. He could only repeat, little sect brother. Shen Yi's breathing suddenly stopped. He felt as if the sword in his hand was being squeezed by two green mountains. It could not move forward at all, nor could it be pulled back. A buzzing sound was heard. In the next instant, countless green yuan qi rebounded and shot in front of him. His body shook violently, as if he had been hit by a giant hammer, and his entire person retreated in dejection. At this time, Ding Ning swung his sword upwards. A square, white sword seal immediately formed. Even colder energy formed in the icy air. A patch of ice passed through the scattering golden threads and passed over Shen Yi's head. Ding Ning put his sword away. He did not say anything. However, everyone understood the meaning behind this. The outcome of this battle had been decided. If Ding Ning was willing, just now, that patch of ice trees could charge at the retreating Shen Yi. Little sect brother. Zhang Yi was overjoyed at the result. He did not know what to say and could only call out softly. Shui Wangshu sighed softly. Too fast. He seemed to be unsatisfied and dissatisfied. Chapter 112. Shui Wangshu said too fast, but to the two from Guangzhou, it had a completely different meaning. Too fast. The chubby merchant's expression was grave. The sword seal path was an uncommon method and too difficult for ordinary cultivators. It was hard to imagine that a cultivator of Ding Ning's age could complete two sword seals in the time it took for Shen Yi to charge more than 100 feet. This is the sword seal path. When Shen Yi heard the chubby merchant's voice, he awoke from his momentary absent-mindedness. He didn't feel the pain or shame of his defeat at all. Instead, he fell into a deep shock. How could you be so fast? Even if you are born with a delicate temperament, it generally takes several years before you can achieve anything in the Tao of sword talismans. Moreover, the sword talisman you just used was not the simplest of sword talismans. Ding Ning ignored the shock of the two from Guangzhou. He glanced at Shen Yi and said simply and directly, I am not an ordinary cultivator. Shen Yi stilled. At this time, Shui Wangshu, who was sitting under the eaves, became angry and shouted, What and what? I said too fast. Ding Ning, you finished too fast. Ding Ning, don't you know that after you don't have to think about cultivation every day, your time seems to be extra long and extra long? Can't you fight a few more moves? Hearing his angry shout, Ding Ning turned around and said with a frown, Your demands are a bit high. Zhang Yi, standing respectfully next to Shui Wangshu, could not help but say softly, Cave Master, this does not seem good. You told me before that I have to use my full power in battle. This is to respect my opponent. Also, little sect brother is young. If I hold back, what if he does not control it well and injures himself? Hearing Zhang Yi's words, Shui Wangshu grew even angrier. He raised his hand and looked like he was going to hit. Zhang Yi, I taught you so much about respecting your teachers, and now you dare to lecture me? Zhang Yi immediately sweated. He bowed in terror and said, This disciple does not dare. So I was a frog in a well in Guangzhou. Hearing the words of Shui Wangshu and Zhang Yi, Shen Yi blushed slightly. Then he bowed solemnly to Ding Ning and said, Seriously, thinking about it now, just now, the speed of the sword seal path and the timing of the two sword seals were perfect. From the start, you knew that I was not a match for you and found it troublesome, so you were unwilling to fight with me. I expected that Xia Ro swore that you would be exceptional in some way, but I had not expected the difference between us to be so great. Looking at this youth, who was neither servile nor overbearing and had the style of Guangzhou, and then turning to look at the furious Shui Wangshu, Ding Ning thought and said, You did not use your full power. Shen Yi said, You have cultivated for a shorter time than me, and your cultivation progress is faster than mine. Even if I suppress my cultivation to the same level as yours, I have cultivated the sword longer than you, and I still have the advantage. Ding Ning shook his head and said, I do not mean that. You deliberately suppressed your cultivation, and naturally you were restrained and did not fight to your heart's content. Shen Yi did not understand Ding Ning's meaning and stilled. I will wait for your 3-yang grass, Ding Ning said calmly. In a few days, I should be able to reach Realm 3. At that time, my cultivation will be close to yours. If you are willing, I will fight with you again. You will not have to be restrained and can use your sword essence to its fullest. That is more like it. Hearing Ding Ning say this, Shui Wangshu's anger disappeared like a child, and he smiled. This. Shen Yi felt that he should be happy. He did want to fight to his heart's content, but he felt that something was not right and felt it was strange. Zhang Yi spoke at this time and said with a frown, Little sect brother, it is not as simple as you think. While you are close to a breakthrough is not something you can do just because you want to. Little sect brother, the people of Guangzhou are straightforward. It is not good for you to lie to him. Chen Yi suddenly raised his head. Only then did he realize what was wrong. There was a great barrier from energy refinement realm to vital energy realm. It was related to comprehending and taking in primal energies of the universe. Many people were stuck at this barrier their entire lives. How could a person in energy refinement realm say he would reach vital energy realm soon, and then really reach vital energy realm soon? You do not need to believe now. Ding Ning was still calm. He looked at Shen Yi and said, You can think of it as my suggestion. If I can reach vital energy realm soon, I will fight with you again. If I cannot, then I will owe you. Facing Ding Ning's calm gaze, Shen Yi nodded and said, I will wait for your news. Also, the Shun family will send the 3-yang grass you want you as soon as possible. Ding Ning bowed in thanks. Many thanks. Shen Yi nodded, put his sword on his back, and turned to leave. Waves of cheers and shouts could be heard from behind him. At the entrance to the alley, Shun Yi's footsteps suddenly became heavy. The heaviness of his footsteps represented his heavy mood. Uncle Jean. He didn't turn around and said softly, even though his senior brother scolded him, that it was impossible to determine the time he would take to break through from the 2nd realm to the 3rd realm, and that it couldn't be too fast. For some reason, I feel that he really can break through very quickly. His gaze was too calm and too confident. Is he really like those rare monsters of Lingshu Sword Gate and Min Mountain Sword Sect, born with a unique perception of the primal energies of the universe, and he does not need to waste any time on this barrier? The slightly fat merchant grimaced. He hesitated, but still said, I feel the same as you. If he really is, as he says, and is not an ordinary cultivator, if he really is a monster, I worry that you will never be able to prove that you are stronger than him. I only hope that you will not be discouraged. Father always told me to stand straight when beaten and to accept defeat when willing to bet. There are too many capable people in the world, and it is impossible to win all of them. But in this life, the only thing a person cannot lose to is themselves. Shun Yi's hands trembled slightly, but his expression grew even more determined. A hint of a smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. This youth looks really good. If this was a child of a noble family in Chongling, they would not behave like this after losing. Shui Wangshu looked at Shun Yi's figure that disappeared into the alley and said, excitedly, Ding Ning, how about you make a bet with him next time and have him call himself a student of White Goat Cave? Ding Ning glanced at him and said, White Goat Cave's present situation is not good. Shui Wangshu's expression froze. He said with a worried frown, actually, it is not so bad. Green Vine Sword Academy is still standing. Zhang Yi had been hesitating all this time. He finally gathered his courage and looked at Ding Ning. Little sect brother, in the coming days, I will use the white goat spirit vein to cultivate. Eldest senior sect brother, why don't you help me take care of Cave Master and take him to places he wants to go? Before he could say anything, Ding Ning looked at him and said. Zhang Yi paused and then nodded helplessly. All right. While the Qin dynasty was stimulated by the law of rewards for military merit, and the people were brave and did not flee in fear when they saw cultivators fight, they would flock to watch. But the people of different places were still different in subtle ways. For example, the Zheng City Zhushan district that Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning had visited before was weak and timid. They were always on tenterhooks, afraid that something bad would happen. The people of Guanzhong were the most bold and violent. Most cultivators used the sword like a blade or an axe, slashing or chopping. They valued their lives, but their promises. Death warriors were the most common in Guanzhong. If Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning had gone to a small city in Guanzhong, and the entire city was an enemy, Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning would have had to slaughter the entire city before they could charge out, or be killed inside. Chongling was the place where the nobility of the Qin dynasty were the most intertwined. The people of Chongling were more moderate and were the most cautious and weighed the pros and cons in their actions. They weighed too many things, and their personalities were more feminine, or rather, more vicious. So Shui Wangshu's sigh was not without reason. The most important thing was, even though his body had matured at about the same time as all the other members of the Dugu family in the past when he was 13 or 14 years old, he was only about the height of an ordinary person who was 12 years old. However, his strong body without using too much medicine allowed his psychokinesis to exceed that of ordinary people. Legend had it that the movements of the people in front of Dugubai's eyes would be slower than the movements of ordinary people, just a bit slower, but in a battle between cultivators of similar levels was a great difference. Ku Shichuan knew he was not as good as Dugubai because he had seen Dugubai fight. In that battle, Dugubai used the simplest long river cut to defeat a cultivator of slightly higher cultivation than him. Even now, when he thought back to that scene, Ku Shichuan could not understand how Dugubai was able to use such a move to defeat the other's exquisite sword move. What he could not understand was the great difference. Ku Shichuan knew that this sect uncle called Li Mayan was doing this for his own good. Usually, this sect uncle of high status in the sect had taught him many times. But he still shook his head lightly. Seeing him shake his head, Li Mayan immediately frowned and said, I admire your determination and perseverance. But the reason that the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave has a rule that only Realm 4 second-class cultivators can enter the Forbidden Grounds and comprehend the Shadow Sword Wall is because many of the sword essences on the Shadow Sword Wall are too sharp, like the mental power of the Elders. Also, many of the sword marks contain primal energies of the universe, just like seal scripts. They will naturally gather some primal energies of the universe. Students like you, who have not reached the required cultivation level, if you cultivate here for too long, your mind and body will be injured by the Shadow Sword Wall. I know your intentions. Ku Shichuan looked up and said respectfully, but my interest in cultivation comes from my pride. Li Mayan said in puzzlement, What do you mean? Ku Shichuan said softly and sincerely, I do not know how you feel as a powerful cultivator, but for me, I really like the gazes of the people around me. When they see me, they are envious, admiring, and even looking up to me. I like this feeling. So, at least for many years before me, the motivation that supported me to work hard and endure loneliness came from this. Li Mayan frowned and said, This kind of feeling is abnormal. You should think further because we are cultivators that surpass mortals and not those girls in the brothels of Chongling. Our strength and cultivation should not be like their beauty and clothing and just want to attract admiring gazes. Sect uncle, I understand what you say. Ku Shichuan said respectfully and sincerely, cultivators should have higher pursuits and not just try to be more beautiful than others in front of others. But I have read in many cultivation books that the best method of cultivation comes from the heart. The feeling that can stimulate one's cultivation the most is the best method. Li Mayan thought silently about Ku Shichuan's words and felt they were reasonable. I know I cannot compare to people like Baosher, Jing, Liu Li, and Dugubai, but at least in front of other people, I must stand out. Ku Shichuan said calmly, Also, when I went to the Green Vine Sword Academy to watch the ceremony, that wine shop youth from White Goat Cave called Ding Ning did make me feel threatened. His performance caused me to be humiliated in front of those people. The wine shop youth's threat and humiliation were the strongest form of stimulation for me. If I cannot comprehend anything here with this influence, then before I reach Realm 4 second class, I will not be able to comprehend anything here. Also, my pride does not allow me to lose to a youth who has just started cultivating. No matter how good his aptitude is, he started much later than me. Even if I don't lose to him, even if I can't make him look up to me, I can't comment on him wantonly from a high position. I won't feel good, and the greatest motivation that supports my cultivation will disappear. So, sect uncle, please do not stop me. Ku Shichuan knelt on the ground and bowed deeply to Li Mayan. She begged, As long as I can obtain any benefit here, I do not care how much pain and torture I have to endure. Li Mayan thought of the recent matters of Ding Ning and Shui Wangshu, and then looked at Ku Shichuan's present state. He sighed softly and did not speak. When the footsteps of this sect uncle who was concerned about her gradually faded away, Ku Shichuan slowly stood up from the ground. He faced the Shadow Sword Wall again and sat up straight. The Shadow Sword Wall was not left behind by the predecessors of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave, but a relic from an unknown ancient cultivation place. The earliest group of cultivators of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave had discovered this Shadow Sword Wall and spent great effort to transport it to the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave because everyone was certain that the cultivator who had left behind these sword marks was of a much higher cultivation than them. The Shadow Mountain Sword Cave was not a first-class sect in Chongling, but the sect where this Shadow Sword Wall once belonged to was definitely a first-class sect. Ever since they obtained this Shadow Sword Wall, the direct disciples of each generation of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave would spend large amounts of time to study it. Yet, in these hundreds of years, only 3 people had comprehended the true meaning from here. One of them, Chu Li had comprehended the strongest sword manual of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave, the Flowing Shadow Sword Manual. Chapter 114. A black door opened from the inside. Wang Taishu, dressed in white fox fur robes, walked out and stepped onto the carriage waiting at the door. In the hall inside the door, the dozen gangsters of Chongling looked at his back and were speechless. Dozens of days ago, this master of two-level tower was just an existence on par with them. Yet, dozens of days later, the other had the strong support of the warden's office. The warden's office had used a series of unusually powerful methods to help him pave the way in Chongling. From now on, many of the rules of Chongling's streets would be set by him. The people present more or less knew the story behind that bloody night. In their view, seizing some territory and benefits from the hands of common people was not much, but daring to seize territory from the hands of the warden's office was enough to make them feel respect and awe. Stepping into the carriage, Wang Taishu rubbed the acupuncture points on the sides of his head. He leaned tiredly against the cushion and closed his eyes to rest. It was not a simple matter to set rules and divide territory for these gangsters of Chongling. Also, he knew that if he wanted to gain a foothold, he could not rely on threatening others. He had to make people feel that he had done better than anyone else in the past. It was nearing the end of the year. The streets of Chongling were more lively than at any other time. There were happy children running through the streets. Even the dilapidated falling parasol was decorated with lanterns and banners, adding to the festive atmosphere. Ding Ning saw Wang Taishu's carriage appear at the entrance to the alley and went to greet it. After sitting down in his usual seat in the carriage, Ding Ning looked at Wang Taishu, who did not disguise himself, and said, "Revenge is a very tiring matter." Wang Taishu smiled. Every time he saw Ding Ning, he would be very relaxed. This kind of relaxation came from the fact that he did not need to think of problems himself. Ding Ning could usually do better than him. "It should be Liang Lian," he said to Ding Ning after his smile faded. To others, this sentence would be very abrupt and confusing. However, Ding Ning was well aware of the information contained in Wang Taishu's words. Ding Ning sneered. What a coincidence! Wang Taishu, however, misunderstood Ding Ning's intentions. He nodded and said, "His military contributions are already full. He just lacks some foundation to establish himself as a marquis. His position in the military is high enough." Some clues also pointed to him. And recently, he was the only one the Empress or the two prime ministers had expressed deep dissatisfaction with. "I just didn't think that it would be such a coincidence that it would be Shui who would express the Empress's intentions." Ding Ning remained silent. To him, the enmity between him and Liang Lian was far more than this. Liang Lian cannot be dealt with so quickly. Like he knew a certain point was a critical point, and a certain point was an opportunity, Ding Ning, whose mind was absolutely calm, slowly spread his mental power outwards. His body and the area around him seemed to have become a small pond. If Nangong Kaishu could sense his perception right now, she would be extremely shocked, because in his perception, there were countless lines. Even the color of each line, the direction and speed of the energy flow in each line were so clear. He did not wait like Nangong Kaishu. Instead, he gently passed his mental power to the many lines. The energies in these lines did not feel fear or resistance. They seemed to sense the arrival of an old friend and became excited. They seemed to cheer and impatiently merged with Ding Ning's mental power. They quickly flowed into Ding Ning's body and excitedly merged with Ding Ning's physical energy. It was like they should be there, like they had been waiting for this moment for too long. Countless stars flashed on the surface of Ding Ning's skin, giving off an unusually bright light. This process was completely uncontrollable for almost all cultivators. It was like snow falling from the sky. When the snow would accumulate, it would depend on the will of the heavens. Yet, this process could be controlled by Ding Ning. There seemed to be countless invisible silkworms crawling out of his body. Countless thin threads reached into the surrounding air. Under the guidance of these thin threads, it was like snow falling from the sky. The snow seemed to fall faster, and the stars on the surface of his body appeared faster. His physical energy merged with the primal energies of the universe in his body, and the speed of the change increased. His entire body seemed to be lit up, and he became as bright as jade. All of the vital energy in his body disappeared, turning into glowing droplets that flowed into his energy sea. This was vital energy realm. His breakthrough was not just a matter of time, but a channel had been dug before the water arrived to make the water flow more smoothly. There was no time for the breakthrough. When his physical energy and body reached the point where he could form vital energy, he would have a breakthrough. The barriers that stopped cultivators did not seem to exist for him. The night was deep, and it was so dark on the mountain path that one could not see their fingers. The white goat cave teacher, waiting on the nearby rope bridge, started to worry. In the past, Ding Ning would have come out at this time. Had he encountered a problem in his cultivation today, just as he was about to fly towards the hut, where Ding Ning was, the door to the hut was pushed open. The moment he saw Ding Ning walk out, and saw Ding Ning's unusually bright and clean face, this middle-aged white goat cave teacher uncontrollably trembled. The rope bridge beneath him emitted countless metallic clangs due to the surging aura. Wang Taishu waited silently in the carriage at the gates of White Goat Cave. In reality, after sending Ding Ning here in the morning, his carriage had not left. When he heard the familiar footsteps and lifted the curtain to see Ding Ning walking over, Wang Taishu was completely stunned. Moments later, he looked at Ding Ning, who had walked in front of him, and said softly in admiration, "I knew something unusual would happen today, but I had not expected it to be so unusual." After a pause, Wang Taishu looked at Ding Ning and said, "From the Sword Trial Festival until now, it has been less than 8 months." Ding Ning and Wang Taishu had not known each other for 8 months. But Ding Ning now knew why Wang Taishu had deliberately said 8 months. Among all the young geniuses in Chongling, and Baosher and Jing Liuli had cultivated the fastest from Realm 2 energy refinement to Realm 3 vital energy realm in 8 months. So Ding Ning's breakthrough today was a new record for Chongling. Chapter 115. A new record in the cultivation world meant that one could leave a deep mark in the history books. But a new record usually meant a new storm. So when Ding Ning returned to the Falling Parasol wine shop and stepped into the wine shop, Zhang Sun Qianshue's displeased voice sounded. "Do you have to let people discover you so quickly?" Zhang Sun Qianshue's words contained 2 meanings. One was that you could control the speed of your cultivation. The other was that even if you wanted to have a breakthrough so quickly, you could hide your cultivation after the breakthrough and not let others detect you. You have to be so fast. Hearing Zhang Sun Qianshue's words, Ding Ning responded briskly. Then he looked at Zhang Sun Qianshue, who had a frosty expression, and explained softly, "Because I want Shui Wangshu to be glorious." Zhang Sun Qianshue seemed to accept Ding Ning's words. Her expression softened, but her tone was still cold. "For you, you have too many things to consider. The final result is the goal. Regardless of whether I can reach the goal, I hope the process can be more exciting and meaningful." Ding Ning looked at her and said, "The fewer fetters a person has, the easier it is to be hated by others." Like all normal old people, Shui Wangshu went to bed early, but he woke up later than most old people. In the dim morning light, Zhang Yi held a bowl of noodles as he listened to the heavy but disorderly breathing coming from the room. Thinking of Shui Wangshu's otherworldly aura in the past, and how he was above Realm 7, he could not help but feel sorrow. Tears were about to drip into the bowl of noodles in his hand. He was very worried that the heavy breathing would suddenly disappear, or that Shui Wangshu would never wake up. Yet just as a tear was about to fall, with a long exhale, Shui Wangshu woke up and welcomed a new day in Changling. Hearing Shui Wangshu stand up, Zhang Yi did not have time to put down the bowl and quickly walked into the yard. Shui Wangshu, who was slowly putting on his clothes, heard the hurried footsteps outside the door. Zhang Yi's hurried appearance appeared in his mind. He could not help but scold. "Why are you in such a hurry? Are you afraid I will sleep to death?" Zhang Yi took a wrong step and froze 5 or 6 steps from Shui Wangshu's door. He said angrily, "It is almost the new year, and you are still saying such inauspicious things." Other than Li Daoji, before Ding Ning had entered White Goat Cave, Zhang Yi had been Shui Wangshu's favorite disciple. However, he could not stand Zhang Yi's pedantry and nagging. Originally, when he heard Zhang Yi's words, Shui Wangshu's white brows rose slightly, and he could not help but scold him. But suddenly his nose twitched, and he smelled a familiar fragrance. He immediately grew curious. "Zhang Yi, you are eating noodles?" Zhang Yi stilled. He looked at the bowl of noodles in his hand and immediately felt ashamed. "You also bring a bowl and eat with us. How can I do that?" Zhang Yi seemed to have made up his mind. He finished all the noodles in the bowl in 2 bites, and then said apologetically, "The 5 grains are bestowed by the emperor and have been sowed by the farmers. They are ground into rice and flour. How can it be wasted?" Shui Wangshu looked at his puffed-up cheeks and sighed softly. He said, "You only remember these old sayings, but you don't know that if you don't listen to the words of the elders, you will suffer losses in front of you. If you knew that this dishwasher likes to pick his nose from time to time, would you still say this?" Zhang Yi's eyes instantly bulged. His expression was spectacular. At this time, Ding Ning's figure appeared in the little courtyard behind him. Zhang Yi turned. The moment he saw Ding Ning's face, the bowl in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter and shattered into pieces. Shui Wangshu couldn't help but shake his head. "Even if you are expressing anger, don't smash other people's bowls." Zhang Yi stammered in a trembling voice. Little sure." Shui Wangshu finally felt something was strange. He looked at Ding Ning, who was walking over, his eyes widening. "Realm 3? His breathing was slightly uneven. He coughed softly and looked uncertainly at Ding Ning. Ding Ning smiled slightly and started to prepare a basin of hot water for washing. "This is," Shui Wangshu said a few words. He really didn't know how to describe it, and immediately roared with laughter. In the eastern suburbs of Changling, there was a secluded courtyard. The walls surrounded a large area, but the buildings inside were small and exquisite. In front of a small house with gray walls and black tiles, there was a natural green spring surrounded by wild grass. At this time, the withered grass was covered in white snow. The spring water in the center was still lively and gave off threads of heat. There were even many red carps swimming in it. A cultivator of indeterminate age was sitting cross-legged in this small house facing the green spring. The reason one could not see his age was not because time had not left marks on his face, but because his hair and beard had not been trimmed for many years. His hair reached the ground, and his beard covered half of his face. But even though his hair was loose like wild grass, his body still had a heroic presence and gave off the presence of spring. 2 men in luxurious clothes stood at the bottom of the stairs to his left. One of them looked to be in his 30s, while the other was in his 50s. Both of them had the kind of imposing manner that only high-ranking officials would have. "Little brother, we may be wrong." The man in his 30s, his hair coiled up with a jade hairpin, looked with some distress at the cultivator with loose hair and said, "The wine shop youth we paid attention to has reached Realm 3. His breakthrough is faster than in Baosher and Jingliuli. Because I feel that there is no good way out, and my revenge seems to be getting more and more hopeless, so I want to take a gamble. Complicated emotions appeared in the bearded, middle-aged official's eyes. In reality, I am not desperate. Unlike other people, I have seen Xue Wangshu a few times. I know that he is the kind of person who can endure. There are countless people in Chongling who can endure, but there should not be a second person like him who can endure so much after reaching Realm 7. Since someone as patient as him was willing to do so many things that went against his nature for the sake of this young man, then this young man should really be worth my gamble. At least in terms of cultivation and talent, Xue Wangshu knows better than me. We are both giving gifts. If I am going to give him a gift, I will give him the most valuable gift. That youth started late and his body is weak. What he lacks is overseas spirit medicines like the whale jade ointment. I have carefully investigated this boy's performance at the Sword Trial Festival. I believe this boy is a person who knows how to repay kindness. Hearing the thoughts of the official, he followed. The skinny advisor felt admiration. He knew that the other had done his homework before making a decision. But when he thought of revenge, the skinny advisor looked at the wrinkles at the corners of the other's eyes and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Falling Parasol suddenly became lively. This was not the usual bustle of the new year, but many grand carriages. The headbands, rouge and powder of the noblewomen, the paperweights in the study, the incense burners, and the jade stones they played with. In the past many years, these things would become symbols of status and identity. Decades ago, the carriages that originally had no cabins and only had canopies evolved into closed cabins. The carriages that could not allow outsiders to see what was happening in the cabins had been a relatively stable and comfortable means of transportation for the nobility. But now, they had many uses such as private meetings and became the most important item in the daily lives of the nobility of Chongling. The cabins grew increasingly exquisite and grand. Just from the materials and decorations, it was possible to see the status of the owner in Chongling. The best carriage drivers could even see the corresponding residence of the carriage. An extremely heavy carriage that was clearly lined with steel plates that could not be penetrated by arrows was originally about to enter the alley. Right at this time, the eyes of the carriage driver, who sat upright like a javelin, suddenly trembled, his brows furrowed. An ordinary-looking carriage made of ordinary sandalwood was entering Falling Parasol from the other side. "What is it?" The carriage behind the carriage driver sensed the carriage stop, and a soft voice of inquiry sounded from within the carriage. "It is the carriage of Fangho Province's Fangyong," the carriage driver responded softly. The nobility in the carriage behind him immediately fell silent and waited patiently. Fangyong was born of a concubine, but his military service was illustrious. In Fangho Province, he was the third most important person after Fangxiang and Fangxiumu. A person like this naturally had a higher status than him. It was at this moment that the coachman of the carriage was stunned again. He saw an extremely square carriage. That carriage also didn't have any particularly luxurious decorations, but every part of the carriage was extremely orthodox, completely conforming to the standard, without any personal preferences. Vice Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Ceremonies, Official Sikong, Lin actually sent someone. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with what he saw, the carriage driver turned around and softly reported to the inside of the carriage in disbelief. Carriages did not stop in front of the small courtyard that Xue Wangshu rented. As soon as one carriage left, another stopped at the door. Looking at the gifts that were sent in and were about to fill half of the storage room, Xue Wangshu, wearing a weasel skin hat, could not help but grin. Was this not a kind of glory? Little sect brother. At this time, Zhang Yi, who had been recording the gifts so that he could return them in the future, suddenly stammered in shock. Shui Wangshu slapped the copper bowl that was warming his hands and shouted, "What now?" Official Fang Yong of Fang, Ho Province sent a gold thread robe over. Zhang Yi seemed to be ashamed of his startled performance. He walked out of the storage room and said softly, Shui Wangshu stilled. The gold thread robe was naturally not made from ordinary gold thread. If that was the case, it would not be valuable to cultivators. The gold thread robe in the cultivation world was made from the silk of a strange flower called the gold thread flower. It was helpful for vital energy realm cultivators to condense energy. It could allow cultivators to absorb primal energies of the universe to replenish their vital energy faster when their vital energy was greatly depleted. This was a great gift, and because the gold thread flower was rare, it was a great gift that could not be bought with money. Even if it is a gold thread robe, there is no need to make such a fuss. Shui Wangshu reprimanded the slightly ashamed Zhang Yi after coming back to his senses. Zhang Yi hung his head in shame and explained softly, "I know, but official Sikong of the Bureau of Ceremonies sent an even greater gift. He sent a box of whale jade cream that is enough to last until next summer." Shui Wangshu was completely stunned this time. The official Sikong of the Bureau of Ceremonies was only Vice Bureau Chief Sikong Lin. While Ding Ning had such a performance, Shui Wangshu knew that a young seedling like Ding Ning was not qualified for the true nobility. People from Fang, Ho Province, had come only because Ding Ning had some history with Fang Ho Province. Li Lingjun was recognized in Chongling as someone who took care of everything personally. He would use some methods only because he had been rejected and humiliated by Ding Ning here. Now, it was inconceivable that someone as powerful as Sikong Lin would pay attention to Ding Ning, even if it was just a meager gift, much less a box of whale jade cream. Whale jade cream was one of the medicines that the Qin dynasty had found useful for cultivators in their century of searching for medicines overseas. It was made from a kind of gelatinous seagrass called whale jade grass in the deep sea. Where this gelatinous seagrass grew, there would be large numbers of black water serpents. If they were facing a true serpent in shallow water, it would not be a particularly dangerous matter for many cultivators. But if they were facing a group of true serpents in the deep sea, then they would have to pay a great price to harvest this kind of seagrass. So whale jade cream was extremely rare. Even marquisate establishments rarely had access to it. This kind of paste was also very useful. If it was applied to the body after bathing, the medicinal power would seep into the skin and bones and stimulate the vital energy to change the blood and marrow. It would not just strengthen the muscles and bones, but also naturally increase one's strength. It was equivalent to reducing the time a cultivator needed to cultivate. So this kind of paste was called foundation building paste. In the dynasties, it was used to replenish the foundation of cultivators. It was enough to use until next summer. This whale jade cream was not a small box, but a large box. This was a great gift that would shock anyone. Zhang Yi could not be blamed for not being calm enough. He even gave such a great gift. Shui Wangshu coughed softly and sighed emotionally. Sikong Lin, what matter do you have? A place like Chongling really makes people like you feel helpless. There are things you cannot solve that need you to do this. Ordinary people had their helplessness and grievances. Those people who stood at the top also had their helplessness and grievances. Shui Wangshu sighed, not because he only understood this truth now, but because he thought, since it was the same no matter how high he climbed, then what was the meaning in climbing higher? But not everyone had such thoughts. Perhaps the vast majority of people would only look back at their lives at the end of their lives. Only then would they think about whether or not they had done the right things, whether or not there was any meaning. Perhaps only then would they understand what they had missed out on and what they actually wanted the most. In the grand study, Li Lingjun looked at the files in front of him. The white hairs at his temples grew thicker. The sound of footsteps broke his heavy thoughts and the surrounding silence. He was wearing servant robes that gave off a stench, but he seemed to shine like he was wearing the most luxurious robes in the world. He looked at Li Lingjun and said, "So do not hesitate. Do not consider other possibilities. You only need to convince one of them." Li Lingjun took a deep breath. He looked up, his expression becoming gentle and amiable again. "You have endured for so long in my establishment for the chance to stand in front of me. So, you already have a chance?" I said that I can resolve your worries. Su Qin bowed again and said slowly, "I am willing to go to the Chu capital to convince Consort Zhao." Li Lingjun looked at him approvingly and said, "You came to me, and I purposely sent you to the stables. You do not hold a grudge, and now you want to help me?" Su Qin smiled slightly and said, "Those at the top do not care about grudges, only benefits." Li Lingjun stood up and slowly bowed. He said, "What do you need?" The change in address meant a change in status. Su Qin knew that he had officially taken the first step to the top. So he smiled even more brightly and said, "You are the ruler. I am the prime minister, a promise to be second only to one and above all. To allow me to return to the country and ascend to the throne, this is not an unreasonable request. This request is not excessive." Li Lingjun did not hesitate. He looked at Su Qin and said, "When do you want to depart?" Su Qin said calmly, "There is no time to lose today." What supported people forward was not just ambition, but more often than not, unwillingness. In the general's tent of the Tiger and Wolf army, Liang Lian looked indifferently at the middle-aged man in front of him. The middle-aged man in front of him wore the armor of his personal guard, but there was an arrogance and wildness on his face that no attendant would have. This kind of arrogance and disdain for the world could only be nurtured by great rebels who dared to oppose an entire dynasty. A person's temperament could only be determined by what they thought and the height of the enemy they faced. These words were not false at all. This middle-aged man, who looked arrogantly at Liang Lian, was naturally one of the direct disciples of Cloudwater Palace, Fan Zhua. "I have already used such methods to give you a warning. Are you still unsatisfied?" Fan Zhua looked at the indifferent Liang Lian. He casually used a small knife to cut a piece of lamb leg on the plate in front of him and chewed. At the same time, he said, "Maybe Zheng Xiu feels that you have secretly interfered in the matter of the Chongling guards alerting us. A cold person like her does not need any evidence." "How can I only be unsatisfied now?" Liang Lian said indifferently. "Otherwise, why would I send someone to deliver a letter to you? I can watch as you are killed by Yi Siling and the Tiger and Wolf army. At the same time, I may have a chance to kill Yi Siling and make the Empress more satisfied with me." Fan Zhua looked with interest at him and continued to cut meat as he ate. "What do you want us to help you do?" Liang Lian said, "Help me kill Shui Wangshu and the youth next to him." Fan Zhua immediately laughed coldly. "Even if you are unsatisfied, do not give up on yourself. Is this necessary? Of course it is necessary." Liang Lian said expressionlessly. "After the warden's office negotiated with that gangster, 2 of my trusted subordinates were killed. I can ignore the wounds the Empress gave me, but I cannot ignore the lives of my subordinates. If I do not care about their lives, no one will work for me. We have fought for so long and know that we cannot always win. We know that people will die if we lose. But if I cannot even defeat a gangster, my subordinates will doubt my abilities. I am not a lone cultivator. I am a general with an army." Liang Lian looked at Fan Zhua, who was narrowing his eyes, and said, Also, soldiers are unpredictable. What is fake is real, and what is real is fake. Right now, no one will feel that I will deal with Xue Wangshu and that youth. If they are killed, people may feel that someone is trying to plant the blame on me and challenge the Emperor's power. You can coincidentally help me do this. Also, do you fear that I will not be satisfied and will bite like an injured wolf? Liang Lian's expressionless face showed disdain. The more I am like you, the closer I am to you, the stronger our alliance will be, and you will feel that I am safer. Fan Zhuo did not disguise his cold smile and said, while you are right, you should know that we are only doing this for the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde. We will not take the risk for this matter. Liang Lian said coldly, you know more than me about true outlaws, people who have nothing to do with the nobility of Chongling. Ever since I arranged for you to enter the city, I have not asked about any of the secrets of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde, or what you are searching for in Chongling. If you are not even willing to do such a small thing for me, what is the meaning of our alliance? Fan Zhuo thought, and felt that if Chongling was more chaotic, it would be more beneficial for their actions. Liang Lian glanced at him and said, that gangster has already gathered some of the factions I want. Other than Fish Market, he is the leader of those gangsters. If we can control him in the future, it will be easier for you to find something. If we look at it from a long-term perspective, in the future, I will be in the light, you will be in the dark, and we will each control a side. Maybe we will not be so unwilling now. Fan Zhuo laughed arrogantly. He felt that he was not eating to his heart's content. He threw away the small knife in his hand and started to eat the lamb leg. At the same time, he said, those people are not cheap, especially if they are going to fight for their lives in Chongling. The price is even higher. Liang Lian looked at him and slowly said, it is not expensive to buy a life. The carriages delivering gifts only gradually thinned and disappeared in the afternoon. All the residents of Falling Parasol felt that a great person had appeared here and were very proud. But Ding Ning was no different from usual. Because he had not gone to White Goat Cave to cultivate, the wine shop had closed many days ago. So when it was near evening, Ding Ning just casually flipped through some of the notes that Xue Wangshu had written over the past few days. At the same time, he watched Zhang Yi play chess with Xue Wangshu. Xue Wangshu's cultivation had been high in the past, but his chess skills were not as good as Zhang Yi's. After losing several games, he finally became angry from embarrassment. He slapped the chessboard and shouted, do you know how to respect your teacher? You won several games, but you purposely made a few bad moves and let your teacher win one game. Looking at Xue Wangshu's angry state, Zhang Yi was ashamed and puzzled. He lowered his head in terror and said, Cave Master, the books say, books. Xue Wangshu was so angry he wanted to hit him, but for some reason, he suddenly became deeply worried. In the end, he sighed and looked seriously at Zhang Yi. He warned, you have a kind personality and have the style of a gentleman, but I worry that you are too kind and will be taken advantage of by villains. So I only want you to remember one thing. All books are written by people. All laws are made by people, rules, and relationships. Think about which is more important. Ding Ning looked at Xue Wangshu, who was teaching seriously. His eyes grew more respectful, but at this time, his body imperceptibly stiffened. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw an indescribably quiet woman in red robes looking at him. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.